What's up everybody, how's it going? This is Kynkie, and welcome to another episode of Tapping the Keg. Today we're going to be talking about a personal favorite of mine from this past year, NieR Automata. Today's keg tapping is going to go a little bit deeper than you might think, because I did end up beating this game before making this video. But without any further ado, let's get things kicked off. NieR Automata is an open-world action RPG game. It takes place in the same post-apocalyptic Earth setting set in the previous game of the franchise, titled NieR. If you are familiar with the first NieR game, NieR Automata's story takes place after the original game's fourth ending. However, you do not need to have any knowledge of the first game to fully enjoy the sequel. As previously mentioned, the setting of this game is a post-apocalyptic Earth that has been invaded by aliens who, shortly after invading Earth, start creating an army of machines that have only one goal: to destroy the human race. Humanity attempts to fight off the machines with their own army of androids. Ultimately, humanity is forced to flee to the moon, while their android counterparts continue to fight on Earth. NieR Automata is set in the year 11,945 AD. Well after humanity retreated to the moon for safety.
More than a dozen large-scale descents upon the enemy. We still haven't managed to repel the invaders.
The story follows the main protagonist, 2B, a female combat model android, along with her companion, 9S, a male scanner model android whose main priority is to assist 2B. And A2, an obsolete female prototype android that was used to create 2B and 9S android models. The plot for NieR Automata starts out very simple. It's a war against the machines, the aliens' creations, and androids, humanity's creations. It seems from the start of the game that your ultimate goal will be to gather intel on the machines and then wipe them out to allow humanity to return to Earth. However, the deeper you get into the game, the more complex the story continues to get. The game offers multiple different endings. Once you've beaten the game once, you really haven't finished the game. And I'm really not talking about 100% completionist type crap here. Now, I feel the need to tell you guys this, but this next part is a very minor spoiler. I feel that I have to tell you this in order to fully tell you guys how the game is played out and how the story is told. It does not spoil any of the story, but a bit of the gameplay, and it is the only spoiler that I will have throughout this review. If you want to be 100% spoiler free heading into this game, there will be a recap at the end of the video, and a link in the description with the proper timestamp. If you save your game and start up again, you replay through the same game you just beat, but instead of viewing the game through the eyes of 2B, you play through the game now as 9S. To say you play through the game exactly as you did before would be a grave mistake. The base story is the same, but roughly 30 to 40% of the game is completely different, because there are times when 2B and 9S split up during the story to complete different objectives. Not only do you play different missions, but the gameplay is different as well. 2B is a well-rounded fighter, whereas 9S focuses more on ranged attacks and uses a new mechanic that is unique to his playstyle. The most important part of this playthrough, and why I feel I need to tell you about it, is that you also see some plot points and character progressions that you would not see on your initial playthrough of the game. The story starts to open up much more once you start to play with 9S, and if you decide to play through the game, you will understand what I mean by that. Once you have completed the second playthrough as 9S, you will have completed 2 of the 5 true endings of the game, and you will unlock a completely new chapter of the game. Once you reach this point of the game, you start to unravel the full story of the game and of the NieR universe itself. Unlike the first two parts of the game, the third has the player hopping back and forth between characters to progress the story at the same time. Once you have completed the third chapter, you will have actually beaten the game. You will unlock one of the last 3 endings, and you will get to save your game again. Once you have done that, you can unlock the last 2 endings very easily without having to replay through much of the game at all. To fully grasp everything that is happening, you will want to obtain all 3 endings. Even after you obtain all 3 endings from the last part of the game, there is another cutscene. This is after ending E. That can be obtained by completing a minigame. Then and only then will you have, in my opinion, beaten the game. While the story is most likely the selling point of this game, the gameplay does not slouch at all. The combat is good in this game. Every time you swing your sword, it feels very impactful. I also like how the game focuses on different characters having different combat styles. It was fun to play the same bosses, but with different playstyles. The most impressive part of the combat are the camera tricks and varying combat styles. The demo of this game gives a very good first taste of how this combat will change throughout the course of the game. There are fights that will start out as your typical third-person, over-the-shoulder combat that you see in most open-world games, but then halfway through the fight, there could be a change in the camera angles to make it into a top-down bullet hell game, much like the old Asteroids game. The camera angle also changes to make the combat into a side-scroller bullet hell game, much like Contra or Metal Slug. The combat styles aren't something new, but putting all these together was super fun to play with, and kept the combat entertaining and fresh from start to finish. As with all open world games, there are multiple ways to progress your character. As you kill enemies and complete quests throughout the game, you earn experience and you can level up. Nothing new. The only downside to this is it seems that the only thing that your level is used for is what enemies spawn in the open world and how much base HP you have. There are no skill points or attribute points that people have come to expect with most open world games, but personally it didn't bother me too much because the other forms of character progression were just great, but I could see why it could bother people. The other aspects of character progression are quite fun. As you journey through the world, you obtain materials which you can bring to a weapon vendor and have him upgrade your weapons. You casually obtain these items as you play through the game, or you can focus on gathering to get the best weapon possible by farming mobs to get the items you need. The different weapons have different perks to them, so it is important to make sure that you look at the perks of the weapons before upgrading them. The weapon upgrading is not only for your melee weapons. Your pod can also be upgraded. The pods in NieR are the equivalent of your fairy in Zelda, except it can deal damage instead of just annoying the piss out of you with tips about the game. Your pod is your main source of range damage, and has different charge-up abilities that you can unlock. These abilities can be both offensive or defensive. These are purchased in the main town, and from what I can tell are the only way to obtain the new skills. Aside from gaining new skills through purchasing them with money, you can also upgrade your pod to increase its damage, much like the melee weapons. The last part, and my personal favorite part, of the character progression is the plug-in chip system. As an Android, you have storage space on your system. The plug-in chips are inserted into that storage space on your system to modify your gameplay. For example, you can get a shockwave plug-in chip that will send a shockwave in the direction that you swing your weapon and damages any enemies it hits. You can equip a plethora of different types of chips. There are chips that can increase your maximum HP, increase your defense, regenerate life after an enemy kill, and even have chips that show features on the map. They're broken down into 5 different categories: system, attack, defense, support, and hacking. The chips can be found throughout the world as random world drops. They can also be picked up off slain enemies and purchased from a vendor in town. You can also fuse chips together to make them stronger. If you have 2 shockwave chips, you can fuse them together to make a shockwave plus 1 chip. If you have 2 shockwave plus 1 chips, you can fuse them together to make a shockwave plus 2 chip, and so on and so forth. As I've mentioned previously, this game is an open world action RPG game. The world is not so big that it feels intimidating though, and once you've gotten far enough into the story, there are ways to travel around more quickly. The game doesn't force you to do any of the open world exploration that you don't want to do, but it does benefit you to do so. There are secret locations you can find and special items within those locations. When you play as 9S, there are also additional things you can find that you can't normally get with 2B. A lot of the time, it is data from the old world that helps the player to get a better understanding as to what is happening in this world since the invasion began. Although the game is placed in a post-apocalyptic setting, it does its best to try and give the player a variety of visuals while you're playing the game, and for me personally, I feel like it did a pretty good job in doing so. The game brings you through varying landscapes that are beautiful within themselves, but it also feels like there's a constant reminder that this is still a post-apocalyptic world. The game simply looks incredible. The art style is perfect for the game, and it is achieved beautifully. Most of the time, I couldn't tell you if a cutscene I was watching was a cinematic or if it was rendered in-game. That's how good this game looks. That being said, there is one minor issue I've had with the visuals in this game. If you aren't in an actual cutscene, the mouths of the characters just don't move at all. Even if the exchange is voice acted, if it's not a cutscene, there is no mouth movement. Which brings me to my next point, sound. The voice acting and music choices are done fantastically for this game. The music was impressive. There was only one track that I did not care for, but after playing further into the game, I suddenly realized why they chose that song, and it made me appreciate it that much more. I've always been a big fan of how games use voice acting and music, and this game has gone well above and beyond what I expected from it. The music choices really resonated with me and even accentuated the story and gave a much deeper meaning behind what was happening. Just to give you a taste of how awesome the music from this game is, all of the music that you've been hearing throughout this video has been from the game. As a little side note, I do want to talk about 2B for a second. If you've seen or heard anything about this game, there's a good chance it ended up with you hearing about 2B. She is the game's main protagonist, and being that the androids are modeled after humans, let's just say she's a very hot 25-year-old. The programmers also knew that people were going to find her attractive. Remember those camera angles I mentioned before? Well, during my time as playing as 2B, the camera had a mind of its own. Typically, people will play a third-person game with the camera looking over your shoulder down towards the ground. Well, and mind you, I only noticed this with 2B, or I had gotten used to correcting it so I wouldn't see it anymore. The camera would slowly change its angle so that it was pointing up towards the sky, so that way you had a good peek under 2B's skirt. Mind you, everything is covered and there's no nudity at all, but it's very easy to see why there's so much dirty cosplay of her already. Well, that about wraps up this tap in the keg, guys. I know it was a bit longer than what most of these will be like in the future, but I really need to play through it all to give you guys a proper review of this one. Before I give you guys my overall rating for this game, I am going to give you that TLDR I promised you earlier in the video. First off is the story. It is extremely rich, it is very deep, and it will keep pulling you back. The combat is awesome. It uses a bunch of different camera angles, it uses different styles, melee, ranged, or a mix of the two. The character progression is awesome. There's leveling, there's upgrading, there's customizing builds. The visuals are amazing. The graphics are awesome. There's a big variety of scenery. The audio is superb. The music is amazing. It's one of my favorite parts of the game. And the voice acting as well is pretty damn good. And last but not least, let's not forget 2B is a freaking hottie. So we don't really need any explanation there. She's just hot. Overall, I would give this game a 5 out of 6 in our 6-pack. I also want to throw in a few bottles of wine, and yeah, I do mean bottles and not glasses. This game isn't one you can just sit down and beat all at once, or even give it a proper first taste in a few hours, and you really shouldn't do that to yourself either. There is so much to this game, and you can't get to it all in just a little bit of time. To really give this game a first taste, you have to at least play through the game twice. Once you do that, you'll really see the story start to take shape and understand what's happening in this world. If you're a fan of JRPGs, open world games, or story-rich games, I would highly recommend this game to you. It should definitely be on your list of games to get.
Hey, it's Radit here. Don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe as well. It really helps out the channel. We put out multiple new videos each week and we appreciate all of your support. Thanks for watching, everyone, and cheers.